If you are friends on Facebook with my friend Cheryl Chandler, you've probably seen her fantastic photographs of this family of bluebirds that she has in a birdhouse in her yard in Atlanta. And Cheryl's a talented singer who's sung here many times, so some of you I know are her Facebook friends, and she comes to bless us with her music sometimes. But anyway, she's taken these great photos of these baby birds as they are beginning to rise. And I think the babies are actually just about to fly away really, really soon. And I know Cheryl watches our talks, so let me say hi to Cheryl and thanks for the photos, and come visit us soon. But anyway, these photos really inspired part of my lesson this morning. And I realized that there are a few spiritual lessons for all of us in the process of birds hatching. My talk title today is Breaking the Shell. And all of us have had experiences of hatching. I want to talk about that today. So just for a brief little science lesson, I had to do a little bit of researching about how do birds really hatch, right? So basically, when the chick is in position with its nose against the shell, its beak is pointing to a little air sac, and it's ready to hatch. And the first thing that the little bird must do is pop the membrane of that air sac so it actually can have more oxygen as it does its thing of getting out of the shell. And from there, the chick uses its wings and its legs to maneuver itself around in the shell. And it has this little temporary part of a beak called the egg tooth. And the chick will peck at that shell in a circle until it creates a weakened spot. But the membranes around the chick are very, very strong, and they're hard to break through. But baby birds are tough. They are determined. They will continue to peck and push at the shell until there's a hole big enough for its little head to come through. And then it takes an additional 12 to 18 hours for the chick to push completely out of its shell, and it's kind of ready to take on the world. So think about that length of time. The chick works for 12 to 18 hours to get itself out. It's got to be exhausting. If you've ever watched this process, it looks exhausting. And actually, Ellen was telling me about an experience that she had on a farm where there were these little chicks hatching when she was a young adult, just getting started in the world of work. And the chicks were in an incubator. And she was fascinated as she watched two of the chicks pop out of their shells. But this little third one, this third chick was really struggling to hatch. And she decided to give it a little bit of assistance. And she removed some of the shell to help the little chick with its hard work. And she thought she was doing a good thing. But she learned soon that that assisted chick would die. Without the strength building process of getting itself out of the shell, the chick would not survive, and it had to be thrown away. And the farmer that she was working with explained that helping in that way actually harmed the bird irreparably. Think about that for a second, because she learned a lesson that day that will serve her well as a practitioner, actually. Everything and everyone has to grow their own muscles through their own efforts. You can stand witness as they grow. You can encourage them and cheer them on. You can celebrate them when they've actually emerged. But everyone must break out of their own shell of limitations. And nature has a lot of these examples of this emerging or hatching, doesn't it? Butterflies have to fight their own way out of their cocoon, and turtles work their own way out of their shells, and even little baby bears, they've got to come out of the den on their own 2 feet. And there's many more examples. And when things are vulnerable and developing, nature has a way of protecting them with a shell, a cocoon, a nest, a den, or some form of external protection in addition to their parents. And only in the midst of the most dire situations will a farmer or a scientist or or, photographers in nature, they won't intervene with this natural process of emerging, because when they do, they know they are risking the life sustainability of that creature, because the hatching and emerging process is critical to development. And we're very familiar with this holy process, aren't we? We get that. The question today is, what are you ready to emerge from? And is there a shell of sorts that you've got to break? In some ways, this lesson today is kind of a continuation of the lesson last week where I talked about birth and the pain that is a necessary part of birthing anything. And the lesson today is that when we push through that pain, we emerge from the shell stronger and more confident. And here's the deal. Our existence in this particular moment is built on our understanding of how life works. And changing that understanding is as painful as any birth of emerging, and just as freeing. Khalil Gibran, the mystic poet and philosopher, he wrote this: "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding." It was actually that quote by Khalil Gibran that I named my talk from, breaking the shell of your understanding. See, based on our experiences up to this moment, we've decided what is possible for us because of our understanding of life. We've decided what is safe for us. We've created this understanding of who we are and how the world's going to respond to us. No one else has put a shell around us. We have organically grown our own shell, and inside the shell in which we live is the world of possibility as we know it. I mean, think about the little chick inside the egg. Think about that for a second. It's perfectly safe. It has everything it needs. There's nothing scary inside the egg. It has no awareness of life beyond the shell and what is possible. It only knows what's inside the shell. Its entire identity is contained inside the shell. It really doesn't even know how it got inside the shell. And day after day, it simply exists comfortably inside the shell. Can you relate to that? You just inside your shell. That's all you know. But we know what happens next, don't we? There's something deep inside the chick, and it's growing restless. The soul of the chick, so to speak, is calling for something greater. The soul of the chick knows that there must be something besides this tiny shell, a bigger life perhaps. Maybe the chick hears noises of life outside the shell and it grows curious. Maybe it hears big bird laughter or joy or something going on out there. But for whatever the natural reasons are, the chick begins the process of breaking itself out of its shell. And I'm sure it pecks for a little bit and then it just gives up. It's like, pecks a bit more and wonders if it should just give up completely, just stay where it is. But that calling inside just won't shut up. The calling is saying whatever your calling is saying. Things like, keep working, get yourself free, a bigger life is possible. You are greater than this shell that you've been keeping yourself safe in. You want more joy and love and purpose than you have now. Keep pecking at this shell. So what is that call inside you saying? Keep working at the shell of your understanding. The pain of staying cramped inside the shell is hard to bear. And the pain of breaking out of it is harder even still, but the promise of a bigger existence is compelling. And it's always calling us, isn't it? We all feel that pull. And I believe there's something inside of the chick and inside of all of us that knows, if I don't get out of this shell, I will die in here in the pain of tightness. Anais Nin famously said, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And so we push onto something greater, and our understanding of the world and how it works and our place in it begins to change. With every piece of the shell that falls away, we can see more possibility with our own two eyes. Oh wow, there's a whole bigger world out here, because you see, our eyes are what pop out first. The shell, remember the little chick, gets its head out first. Our faces break out and we can see more and more possibility for ourselves. And sometimes there's so much opportunity and possibility that we can feel overwhelmed. We can't duck our heads back inside the shell, so we just sit there with everything else inside and we just look around, don't we? The shell of our limited beliefs has hidden so much of life from us. Now that we've pushed through enough to see, we can see people who are happy. We can see people who live addiction-free. We can see people who find joy in everyday activities. We see people living in abundance of every kind. We see people surrounded by love in lots of relationships. We see people forgiving mistakes and disappointments and moving into gratitude readily and rapidly and easily. We see the possibility of not being pulled into grievances and anger, and instead living peacefully with inside our own beings. We see people in balance in their bodies, in their hearts, and in their minds. And we see people who are not all bound up by fear. And we want some of that. We want some of that. We need some of that. Breaking out of the rest of our shell and actually joining those people is going to take some painful work, because the basic understanding of ourselves and life itself is going to have to change. You know, bits of the shell fall off as we release our attachment to safety and security and everything being known and in control. And more bits of the shell fall off as we release our identity as victims of this or that. And more bits of the shell fall off when we let go of the idea that life has to be filled with struggle and suffering. And here's the lesson that Ellen learned with that little baby chick. We might see those around us that still have bits of shell stuck on them, but we can't pretend to have the skill to remove it for them. That is a strength-gaining activity that they've got to do for themselves, and we must do it for ourselves. We can so wish that our minister or our teacher, our practitioner, or our parents, or somebody would take that little bit of shell off our butts. But no, we've got to do that for ourselves. So let me tell you a personal example of a fairly recent large chunk of shell that I had to remove a few years ago for myself, and how I fought my way out of it. So as you may know, some of you don't, but I grew up in a family where there was not a lot of demonstration of emotional love. And since I had no idea of how to love myself, I began to look outside myself for proof that I was loved. So very early in my life, like age 5 or so, I began to collect mementos of proof that I was loved. I didn't know it at the time that's what I was doing. Looking back, that's what I was doing. So I had this box in my closet where I tucked away every letter, every card, every little memento of affection that I got. So if I got a card in the mail or a letter or a birthday or anything, they all went into the box. And I kept this tradition for my entire life until I literally had 5 or 6 large boxes and bins that held all of this proof of love that I had gathered. Every friendship provided me with some proof, right? Every significant relationship gifted me with another layer of sediment in my boxes. And each box had these layers in them. And I moved these boxes from house to house to house my entire life. They were a part of my identity. They were this mirror that I could look into and say, Laine, you're loved. You're loved, you're wanted, you always have been. That collection of proof of love mirrors kept me safe for decades. So 2 years ago, when my marriage ended and we were selling our home and I was moving into an apartment here in Tampa, I was faced with the decision, what do I do with these boxes? I wouldn't have a spare inch of space in my apartment. My divorce actually had shattered some of the connections with the people represented in the boxes, right? So did I really need to keep them? Could I truly let go of them? What did they actually mean to me, and how were they limiting me? My soul was calling for me to release my attachment to the past. So I made one of the most painful decisions of my life. I decided to actually go through the boxes and discard 99% of it. So I sorted through all of it, and I set aside some cherished things like letters from my late grandmother and a few things from my mom and my daughter, and some things in my own handwriting too. So I was careful. I didn't just dump them. And all the rest of it, I tearfully placed in a recycling bin that was completely full as I rolled it to the curb that night. It was a long, long day. I don't know if it was 12 to 18 hours, but it was close. It was a long day. I did laugh a little, but mostly I cried. It was gut-wrenching to release all of it. But my goodness, what a huge shell I broke through that day. And looking back, what I realize now is that those boxes were holding me in the past emotionally and symbolically. They contained my identity, and quite frankly, even though my identity had shifted and changed many times and significantly throughout my life, something about those pieces of paper kept me tied and loyal to old versions of myself. And here's the deal: no one could break me out of that shell but me. If someone else had simply thrown the boxes out, I wouldn't have gained the strength I've gained by going through and pushing against each part of it. I cried myself free, and I cried myself strong. And I wasn't ready to take that step until I was ready. And one day I was. And I'm just so grateful that that day came. And even though it was painful, it was victorious for me. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Through that process, I woke up to a higher consciousness, a higher level of awareness of the power of now. My energy was strung out all across the path of the past, and it was captured on all those pieces of paper, allegiant in some way to all of those people and to the version of myself who I was when that piece of paper was given to me. And man, was that painful. The Buddhists teach that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. I said last week that birth was painful, but I wasn't talking about suffering. I wasn't talking about suffering. I'm not suggesting that suffering has to be a part of anything. Suffering is when you tell yourself that you shouldn't be having pain, that somehow you're the victim of pain. When you're in pain, move past the idea that you shouldn't be having pain. Look at it as necessary pain that is pushing you towards change. Perhaps the pain is another piece of your shell of limitation breaking or falling away. And if we focus on the growth that is occurring, the pain suddenly has a purpose. The process of breaking my shell made me so strong. Over the past 2 years, I have found just greater freedom from the need to be so sentimental, right? I now know more completely than ever before that my past does not define me and it doesn't limit me. I have a greater ability to be in this moment, in this current relationship, in my current position, because I have brought all of my power and energy from the past to serve me now. My wings are stronger from pushing against the shell. And I tell you this story, not because you just need to know my story, but to encourage you to know that you have more of your shell to break free too. And I hope my illustration just provides you with some insight into what yours might be. We just simply have to hatch. And the great writer C.S. Lewis explains why. He said, "It may be hard for an egg to turn into a bird, but it would be a jolly sight harder for it to learn to fly while remaining an egg. We are just like eggs at present, and you can't go on indefinitely being just an ordinary, decent egg. We must be hatched or go bad. If you stay in your egg, you're going to go bad. You will die. Is there anything you cling to that limits your freedom of movement? Are there people around you who want you to be someone you used to be and can't accept who you are now? Do you have ideas about life that seem to keep you stuck on topics which other people seem to have greater ease around? Are there negative thoughts that prevent you from seeing the good in a situation? Those are clues of some shells that might be stuck to you. And all these kinds of shells have to be broken through if you ever want to dance and enjoy life fully, if you're ever going to fly. Because once you break through that membrane that you've been keeping safe behind and small, you're going to have to continue to thrash about with your wings and your legs to get out of all of the shell. You've got to keep identifying those habits and thoughts and beliefs and ways of being that holds you back from moving completely freely and confidently. Keep kicking your legs against the shell, because you're actually going to have to stand on those legs and move out there amongst the free birds if you're ever going to live like them and fly. The first steps and the first attempts at flight, they're going to be wobbly. They're going to be so wobbly. But here's what I know. There's a whole flock of us around you all the time and cheering you on. We know better than to try to do it for you. We can't do that. But we also know you have a lot of strength inside you that pushes you forward. We know that the call inside your little chickie soul is so loud and it's so persistent. Just break the shell and be free. Please join me in a one-sentence affirmation. Today I break free and I let the shell of limitation fall away and no longer hold me back. I believe you can fly. And so it is.